resurrection demonstration. So you've got, I started out then to say, okay, so let's look at that last claim, the one about, okay, you're not coerced, you're making up a story, you're dying for it. You know, would such a thing occur? Would a person die for a lie they made up if there was no coercion? And what I found is that there's something called voluntary false confession, which is when you go in and you lie and you say, I murdered someone, and you put yourself at, you know, basically beg for a first-degree murder charge to be slapped against you. And people do this. They make it up, and they go in and they say it. And when the Lindbergh baby was kidnapped and killed, there were over 200 people who threw themselves, forward to say, I did it. Right. I did it. I killed the baby. Well, obviously 200 people did not kill the baby. So who are these people? Who are these people coming forward to say, I want to be, arrested for a capital crime that I didn't do? And for what? What are they doing? I mean, these weren't all people calling in from asylums. I mean, these are people that were out, free people saying, I murdered this baby, and they didn't. So what in the world would motivate a person to admit to something they didn't do that's a capital offense, and there's no pressure on them whatsoever to do it? They're just simply making it up. Well, it's according to, what do I have here? The paper False Confessions, Why? Which is by Kathleen Doheny, and you can find it at the Williams College Psychology Department website. She says some false confessors have a pathological need for attention, and that's according to Saul Kassin, who's a PhD and distinguished professor of psychology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York and professor at Williams College in Williamstown, Mass. And he says it to explain confessions like John Mark Carr's. And if you recognize that name, or if it sounds familiar to you, John Mark Carr was a man who was living in Thailand and wrote to someone and said, I was there when JonBenet Ramsey died, and in fact, I can tell you it was an accident. And he basically started confessing to this murder. And the person that he was writing to turned him into the police. Why in the world would John Mark Carr claim to have been responsible for JonBenet's death or have to be somehow tied to it? I mean, what would make a person do that? It was an unsolved crime. The police were desperate to arrest somebody. They were really out, just looking for anybody they could get their hands on. They flew him in from Thailand. They brought him in handcuffs, and the man was lying. He had nothing to do with it. He was just fascinated by JonBenet Ramsey.
Or he wanted a free plane ride
to the U.S.
I want out of Thailand. Let me confess to
Well, according to Kassin again, he says that's what everyone is speculating in the Carr case. The pathology is such that the need predominates, and everything else fades into the background. And Doheny adds, even the risk of prison or death. They are driven by the limelight, adds Eric Hickey, PhD, professor of criminal psychology at California State University, Fresno, and director of the Center of Forensic Studies at Alliant International University, Fresno. So this is obviously something that psychology is a little bit familiar with. And so we have described here people who are motivated by an insatiable need for attention, a lot like the boy who cried wolf. They just want attention. And so they start confessing to capital crimes because that's a quick way to get your name out there. And it doesn't take, like I said, a big audience. It can be a small audience to motivate these people.
Yeah, and I don't want to necessarily jump ahead because I don't know for sure if you mentioned this. In the specifics of Christianity, there is this encouragement that you're doing the right thing when people want to persecute you. When you're being persecuted, for example, I can't count the number of times I've heard it, boy, the devil's really been working at me lately. I must be doing it right for Jesus type of thing. Mm-hmm. That adds a motivator to things like this. A possible one. I'm not necessarily saying that people are lying. I'm just saying that, here are all the possibilities. And that's what Tracy's trying to do. Is let's go through and see what all possibilities are to determine how good of a case we really have. And yet, when you listen to the people who have accepted this and want to use it as an example of how ironclad their beliefs are, they have ignored all of this and just said, nobody die for a lie. Well, thank you for spending so much time in deep thought about this. I'm glad that you accepted the first thing that came along.
Right. And let's see. In a CBS News story, Alan Hirsch, professor of legal studies at Williams College, founder of the blog The Truth About False Confessions, stated, quote, "As hard as it is to believe, there are just many, many false confessions for many reasons. And so if I hear that someone confessed, my reaction is not, oh, they did it." In other words, he doesn't assume that just because someone confesses something that they're telling the truth, even if they're confessing to something they would die for.
This has gotten so common that I can probably remember a half a dozen occasions in the last maybe every episode of some crime shows where they have somebody in there who's confessing, and either it's a false confession,
right,
or the investigators go, "We don't know yet. Did he do it? I know
right,
he's confessing, but he might be lying."
Right.
I mean, this is something that everybody has become aware of, and yet
right,
somehow the martyrs must have died for the
right,
truth crowd are not aware of this.
It says, let's see, Hirsch goes on to say, voluntary false confessions can be motivated by a suspect's desire for notoriety. In high-profile cases, it is not rare for multiple innocent people to tell the police they're guilty. Another thing you'll find is that sometimes people confess to murders that never happened.
Yeah.
They make up that I killed somebody, and there's not even a murder. So anyway, in case I don't want to get just hung up on notoriety, because there's actually other motivations beyond just attention for why people do this. And there's one that says, in Dohany's article, in talking about voluntary false confession, Hickey also points out other confessors are angry and want to be heard. They want a voice. They don't feel like they have a voice. So it's just a way for somebody who feels like no one hears them to be heard. And while that's a lot like notoriety, it's a little bit different because it's more of an angry tone that says no one's listening to me, and so I need to do something to make people listen to me. And so it's a little bit of a different motivator. You still want the attention, but it's for a different reason. But Hickey says that he doesn't think that this is what motivated Carr. He thinks that it's possible that Carr wanted to be connected to JonBenet so badly that maybe he thought about it so much he fantasized himself into believing it. Cassine describes a situation where a person imagines an event over and over and becomes uncertain about whether it's real or not. In Dohany's paper, he says the memory research is clear on that. The memory research on this is clear. It's called imagination inflation. Basically, you tell yourself something over and over, and then you start to believe that it really happened.
And this is, I'm not being an expert, but this seems to me to be similar to what you see in cults.
Oh,
where
yeah.
There's this constant reinforcement.
Well, that's what I put here.
Oh,
I feel compelled to note that part of religious indoctrination and ritual is repetition, to hear the stories over and over.
I'm just going to be quiet because Tracy's got it all right here.
Well, anyway, yeah. I mean, we even had a caller where someone called in and said that he remembered a vacation, a childhood vacation, and he was talking about it one day, and somebody in his family said, "You weren't even there." And he had just internalized all the stories. Like, he heard it so much that he had vivid, images of being on this vacation, and he was never there.
And I've had similar incidents. There's a group of friends who were in the Navy,
right?
And we have these really funny stories of people doing something stupid or saying something stupid. Whether it be something as inane as getting a song lyric wrong that was particularly funny, or doing something incredibly embarrassing. And having heard the stories a number of times, the players get swapped around. On occasion, somebody will be telling the story, and then Matt said, and no, I didn't do that.
Right.
That was Tim, or I'll think that Tim did it, and Sean will say, no, that was you,
and
dumbass.
you were all there.
Yeah. And we were all there.
Right. So, and then there's another motivation. Cynthia Cohen, I'm trying to see if I already noted her or not, describes something that she attributes this term to Paul Ekman, who is an eminent psychologist. He calls something duping delight. He says in putting something over on someone, they get a thrill. Or Cohen adds, in putting something over on someone, they get a thrill. It's almost like someone who likes to bungee jump. Someone who has duping delight gets excitement from telling a lie and having someone believe it. Maybe they got rewarded for their tall tales in childhood. Perhaps their friends or even their parents thought the behavior was cute. And she does offer this as an explanation for voluntary false confession. Also, some people engage in voluntary false confessions because, this came from the chapter titled False Confessions, the Temple Murder Case, and the Tucson Four from the book The Right to Remain Silent by Gary L. Stewart, former editor of Arizona Law Review, who says that false confessions derive from several psychological conditions. A suspect may feel guilty about something he has done or failed to do, and something completely unrelated to the crime in question. So in other words, you feel guilty about something else, and you confess to something you didn't do in order to be punished. Stewart talks about the frequency of these confessions. He says the frequency of false confessions is a vigorously debated question in the legal world. An even more complicated question arises in trying to determine how many wrongful convictions are based on false confessions. Estimates range from a low of 35 to a high of 840 annually. Now, to be fair, this includes any false confession, not just a voluntary one. So this would include coercion as well. Right. Police beat me up, and so that's what I said. Those would be tucked in there as well. But keep in mind that 200 people falsely confessed to Lindbergh's, murder. So, it wouldn't take much.
Kidnapping.
It was kidnapping and murder. The baby was killed. So,
Ooh.
Yeah. And anyway, all I'm trying to offer here, and this is what I say in the blog, all I'm trying to offer here is that based on what we know about reality, it is not unreasonable to reject the claim that nobody would voluntarily die for a lie if he knew it was a lie. Certainly there are people who would, and they're all over the literature, demonstrable. We understand some of the motivations that psychologically, push these people to do this. They're there. They're there, and they are not just a couple people. This is a lot of people. I'm not saying it's like the majority of people, but certainly it's not like so rare that it's unheard of. There's a lot of different motivators. There's a lot of people that come forward. People are still confessing to the Black Dahlia murder in Hollywood.